At the party, Emily's father suddenly announced, "Jake, I was wondering if you would marry Emily," while she stood frozen beside him. I nearly choked on my drink and realized my life was about to change forever. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in this surreal situation where my boss's client was casually proposing I marry his daughter at a corporate barbecue. This story starts 3 weeks earlier when I was just another overworked sales analyst, grinding through another late night at the office. I'm Jake, 27 years old, and I've been working at Industrial Supply Solutions for 5 years. We manufacture specialized parts for major corporations, and I handle the analytical side of our sales department. 2 years ago, I was promoted to senior sales analyst, which sounds impressive, until you realize it mostly means I'm the guy who stays late cleaning up everyone else's messes. My daily routine was pretty monotonous. Wake up at 6 a.m. in my suburban rental apartment, commute an hour into downtown, spend 10-12 hours buried in spreadsheets and client reports, then drag myself home around 9 p.m. The only variation was whether I'd have time to grab the half-price deli items at my local supermarket before they closed. That particular night, I'd finished a quarterly analysis that should have been a team effort, but somehow became my solo project when the contract employees hit their hour limits. Walking to the train station, I noticed a couple arguing near the platform. The woman broke free from the man's grip and ran off with him chasing after her. Just another late-night drama I didn't have the energy to process. I stopped at my usual supermarket and grabbed a discounted sandwich and beer. The cashier, a friendly middle-aged woman named Jess, gave me her usual smile. "Half-price special again, Jake?" "You know me too well," I replied tiredly. Bachelor life isn't glamorous. Walking home through the quiet suburban streets, I was looking forward to collapsing on my couch when I noticed a woman staggering ahead of me. At first, I thought she might be drunk, but as I got closer, the situation became clearly wrong. Her clothes were muddy, her hair disheveled, and she was barefoot and dragging her left leg. "Excuse me, are you—" I started to say, but before I could finish, she collapsed. I caught her instinctively, my heart racing as I realized she was unconscious but breathing. "Help! Someone please call an ambulance," I shouted toward the nearby houses. Several neighbors emerged, including Jess from the supermarket who lived in the area. While someone called 911, I held the woman steady, trying to remember first aid basics about not moving potentially injured people. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly assessed her condition and loaded her into the ambulance. "Is there anyone who can accompany her?" one asked, looking at the small crowd that had gathered. Everyone looked at me expectantly. I was the only one who could explain what happened, so I found myself riding in an ambulance for the first time in my life, wondering how my quiet evening had turned into this crisis. At the hospital, I explained the situation to the emergency room doctor. The woman had no identification, and I emphasized that I didn't know her at all. According to the medical team, she had a fractured left leg and was suffering from exhaustion, but wasn't in life-threatening condition. The police arrived to take my statement. I described finding her on the street and mentioned the arguing couple I'd seen at the station, though I wasn't sure if they were connected. They took my contact information and said they'd follow up. By the time I got home via expensive taxi ride, it was nearly 2 a.m. I heated my forgotten sandwich, took a quick shower, and tried to process the surreal evening. My phone rang just as I was getting into bed. More police questions, same information provided. I finally fell asleep around 3 a.m., knowing I had to be back at work in 5 hours. The next morning felt like a fever dream. I somehow managed to catch the train, and even found a seat where I grabbed a few minutes of sleep. Arriving at the office, I forced a cheerful "Good morning," and settled into my usual routine, as if helping save someone's life was just another Tuesday night activity. I was deep in quarterly reports when I noticed my boss, Tom, and section chief, Ken, weren't at their desks. When Tom returned, instead of going to his own workspace, he walked directly to mine with an expression I couldn't read. My first thought was panic, the shoulder tap of termination. Had I screwed up a client account, made an error in the quarterly analysis? But Tom was smiling. "Jake, you did well." "I'm sorry, what's this about?" I asked, forcing a nervous laugh. "We got a call from President Smith of Apex Manufacturing this morning. He said you helped his daughter last night." The pieces clicked together instantly. That woman was President Smith's daughter. Apex Manufacturing was one of our biggest clients, accounting for nearly 30% of our annual revenue. President Smith himself was known in our industry as both demanding and incredibly loyal to companies that treated him well. This afternoon, President Smith is coming to meet with President Johnson. He specifically requested that you be present, Tom continued. I'm counting on you to make a good impression. I spent the morning in a daze, trying to focus on work while processing this development. Apex Manufacturing wasn't just any client. They were the client that kept our mid-sized company competitive against larger suppliers. Their contracts funded my salary and everyone else's in the building. When President Smith arrived that afternoon, I was escorted to President Johnson's office with sweaty palms and a racing heart. Inside, I found a distinguished man in his 50s sitting across from our company president, with an elegant woman beside him who was clearly his wife. Jake, this is President Smith and Mrs. Smith from Apex Manufacturing, President Johnson said formally. President Smith stood and gripped my hand with both of his. Jake, I cannot thank you enough for helping Emily last night. When we got the call from the hospital saying a stranger had brought our daughter in, his voice caught slightly. Mrs. Smith nodded with tears in her eyes. We were so frightened when she went missing. To know that someone like you was there when she needed help most, we're incredibly grateful. President Johnson gestured for everyone to sit. Jake, what we're about to discuss is confidential. President Smith has a private matter he'd like your assistance with. President Smith took a sip of coffee before continuing. Jake, my daughter Emily is 21 and in her third year at State University. For the past month, she's been experiencing some serious stalking issues. I felt my stomach drop. The arguing couple at the station suddenly made more sense. Emily is on the university's festival planning committee, which means late nights and irregular schedules. She hadn't been home for several days, and we were about to file a missing person report when the hospital called. President Smith paused, clearly emotional. The police told us she was being pursued by someone and injured herself escaping. If you hadn't found her. President Johnson leaned forward. Jake, as a company, we owe President Smith our support. I'm temporarily reassigning you as my chief secretary to assist with this situation. Tom and Ken will handle your regular duties. I saw Tom and Ken exchange glances of barely concealed panic. My regular duties included the entire analytical framework for our sales department, quarterly reports, client trend analysis, and strategic planning documents that nobody else fully understood. I'd essentially built the reporting systems from scratch over 5 years, and Tom's computer skills peaked somewhere around email and basic Excel. I understand this is sudden, President Johnson continued, but you'll report directly to me and have full flexibility to work from wherever necessary. This takes priority over everything else. Tom looked like he wanted to object, but couldn't exactly argue with a presidential directive to help our most important client. Ken just looked defeated, already calculating how many 60-hour weeks lay ahead. Within hours, word had spread through the office that I was now the hero who saved President Smith's daughter. Colleagues who barely acknowledged me before were suddenly treating me like some kind of celebrity. The irony wasn't lost on me. 5 years of excellent analytical work had gotten me modest recognition, but one random act of human decency had instantly elevated my status. My first priority was visiting Emily in the hospital. Walking into a private room to meet the daughter of our biggest client felt incredibly intimidating. I knocked nervously and heard a soft voice say, "Come in." Mrs. Smith was there, and when she saw me, she immediately stood up. "Jake, Emily, this is Jake, the young man who helped you." From behind a privacy curtain came an embarrassed voice. "I'm mortified that you're seeing me like this." "Nonsense," Mrs. Smith said, pulling back the curtain. "Jake drove here to check on you." Emily was sitting up in bed with her left leg elevated and wrapped. Even with hospital hair and no makeup, she was strikingly beautiful. Large, expressive eyes, delicate features, and an apologetic smile that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. "I'm so sorry for all the trouble I caused you," she said softly. "Having to ride in the ambulance, deal with police questions, miss sleep before work." "Please don't apologize," I managed. "I'm just glad you're okay. How are you feeling?" We talked for about an hour, and I discovered Emily attended my alma mater, State University. She was majoring in communications and was passionate about event planning, hence her role on the festival committee that had led to her recent late nights. When I stood to leave, Emily asked hesitantly, Jake, would it be okay if you visited again? It gets pretty boring here. Mrs. Smith walked me to the door. Jake, Emily has been so withdrawn since this happened. Today is the first time I've seen her smile. Please, if you have time, I think your visits really help her healing process. Over the next week, I visited Emily every evening after work. Our conversations became increasingly comfortable and natural. She was intelligent, funny, and had a warmth that made even the sterile hospital room feel welcoming. I found myself looking forward to these visits more than I wanted to admit. The police investigation was moving slowly until Emily's purse was found in some bushes near where I had discovered her. The bag had blood on the metal brand logo. Not Emily's blood, but presumably her attackers. The injury would have been deep enough to leave a scar, which gave investigators something to look for. Emily was eventually discharged for home recovery, which meant visiting the Smith residence. Their house was intimidating, a large suburban estate that screamed successful executive, but the family atmosphere was warm and welcoming. Jake, since it's your day off, please don't call me President Smith, her father said over dinner. Kevin is fine. Their family dynamic was exactly what I'd always imagined a stable, loving household would look like. Kevin worked hard but prioritized family time. Mrs. Smith, call me Linda, was an excellent cook who clearly took pride in taking care of her family. Emily, despite her injury, was helping with dinner preparations and laughing at her father's corny jokes. Sitting at their dinner table, I felt a pang of loneliness. Family is really something special, I said, probably more wistfully than intended. I need to find a wife soon. The comment created an awkward silence. Emily suddenly focused intently on her plate, her cheeks reddening. Kevin quickly redirected to offering me more wine, but I noticed Linda giving her husband a meaningful look across the table. The breakthrough in the stalking case came through pure coincidence. At my usual supermarket, I was debating between discounted items when a man reached past me aggressively for fried chicken. As he turned away, I noticed a significant scar across the back of his hand, exactly the type of injury Emily's bag clasp would cause. I asked Jess about him after he left. Oh yes, I see him regularly. He's a delivery driver for Meal Express service. That hand was bandaged for weeks, must have been a nasty cut. The pieces fell into place. As a delivery driver, he would have seen into homes, including Emily's. He could have become obsessed with her during routine deliveries. I convinced Emily to come shopping with me several times over the following days. Moving with crutches was difficult for her, but she seemed to enjoy the rare outings. On the fourth visit, the scarred man appeared. Emily gripped my arm immediately. That's him, she whispered. That's Manuel, my stalker. I called the police, who were waiting nearby as we'd arranged. Emily's positive identification led to Manuel's immediate arrest. He confessed to becoming obsessed with Emily after delivering food to the Smith house multiple times and seeing her through windows. With the stalker caught and prosecuted, the case was officially resolved. President Smith was incredibly grateful and offered me a substantial bonus, which I decided to share with Tom and Ken, who had been covering my regular work duties. They'd both gained new appreciation for the complexity of my analytical systems, which had made them surprisingly supportive rather than resentful. President Johnson suggested celebrating with a company barbecue at the Smith residence, inviting key employees and their families. It was meant to be a relaxed thank you gathering, acknowledging both the successful resolution of Emily's case and the strengthened business relationship between our companies. The party atmosphere was wonderful. Kevin had clearly gone all out with premium food and drinks, creating a genuine celebration rather than corporate obligation. Emily was moving around freely now, laughing with guests and looking genuinely happy for the first time since I'd known her. As the evening wound down and I was preparing to leave, Kevin called me over to his table. He was holding 2 glasses of wine and had a serious expression that seemed incongruent with the festive atmosphere. Jake, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened, he said, handing me the wine. Your character, your reliability, the way you've treated Emily and our family. Emily appeared beside us, carrying a tray of drinks. Dad, I brought more wine like you asked. Perfect timing. Emily, sit down. I want to talk to both of you. She settled into the chair next to me, and I could see curiosity and slight concern in her expression. Kevin took a measured sip of wine, then looked directly at me. Jake, I'll get straight to the point. I was wondering if you would marry Emily." The wine I'd just sipped came spraying out in shock. Emily went completely rigid, her face cycling through embarrassment, surprise, and something I couldn't quite identify. "President Smith, Kevin, that's a pretty heavy joke," I managed to say, wiping wine from my chin. "It's no joke," he replied seriously. "I wouldn't choose my daughter's partner lightly. Jake, I believe you are worthy of her. After witnessing your actions, your character, your dedication, I've come to trust you with not only Emily, but potentially my business legacy someday." Emily's face had turned bright red. "Dad, what are you saying so suddenly?" she stammered. I realized the entire party had gradually gone quiet around us. Kevin's voice had carried, and now 20-some people were watching this surreal conversation unfold. "I understand this is unexpected," I said carefully, "and I'm incredibly honored by your confidence in me. But accepting such an offer too quickly would be disrespectful to Emily. It would look like I'm marrying her for status or wealth rather than genuine feelings." Kevin studied my face intently, and I felt like I was being evaluated in the most important job interview of my life. I downed my remaining wine in one gulp to steady my nerves. "If Emily accepts my confession, then I will consider your offer," I said, turning to face her directly. "Emily, I need to be completely honest. From the moment I saw you in that hospital bed, I started developing feelings for you. These past weeks, getting to know you, seeing your strength and kindness, I've fallen for you completely." Emily's eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't look away. "I'm confessing now because this moment demands honesty. I'm a simple man with a steady job and genuine intentions. I want to protect you forever, make you happy, be the partner you deserve. I might make you cry sometimes, but I'll never let you suffer." I extended my right hand toward her, palm up. "Will you go out with me? Will you give me the chance to prove I'm worthy of your heart?" The silence stretched endlessly. I kept my eyes closed, terrified of seeing rejection in her face. Then I felt her small, warm hand slip into mine. When I opened my eyes, Emily had tears streaming down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "You have to take responsibility for making me feel this way," she said softly. "If you're okay with someone like me, please be with me forever." She practically launched herself into my arms, and I held her tightly as applause erupted around us. Kevin started clapping slowly, then Linda joined in, and soon the entire party was cheering. In that moment, with Emily in my arms and her family's approval surrounding us, I felt like my entire life had suddenly reorganized itself around this incredible woman who'd literally collapsed into my path at exactly the right moment. I also fainted from the overwhelming combination of alcohol, emotion, and sheer disbelief at how dramatically my life had just changed. Fast forward 2 years to our wedding day. Emily looked absolutely radiant in her white dress, and Kevin, now my father-in-law, was crying openly as he walked her down the aisle. Linda kept dabbing her eyes with tissues while beaming proudly. The wedding was everything we dreamed of, surrounded by the same friends and family who'd witnessed our unconventional engagement at that memorable barbecue. Tom and Ken were there too, both having received promotions after successfully managing the analytical systems I'd built, though they still joked about those stressful weeks when they had to figure out my complex reporting frameworks. During our reception, Emily laughed as she reminded me, "You know, I claimed I forgot your confession from the party." "You remembered every word, didn't you?" I asked, spinning her around the dance floor. "Of course I did, but I wanted to hear you say it all again, just to make sure you meant it." Looking at Emily's radiant smile, I knew I'd spend the rest of my life making sure she never doubted how much she meant to me. Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the simplest act of human kindness, helping a stranger who needs you most. As for Manuel, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison for stalking and assault. The last I heard, he was working in the prison kitchen and had been banned from any delivery service jobs upon his eventual release. Emily never had to see him again, and we made sure our new home had excellent security systems. Kevin eventually offered me a position at Apex Manufacturing with a significant salary increase, but I chose to stay at Industrial Supply Solutions, where I was promoted to sales director. The partnership between our companies grew stronger, and I became the primary liaison for all Apex contracts, a role that perfectly combined my analytical expertise with the personal relationships I'd built. Today, Emily and I live in a beautiful house just 10 minutes from her parents, close enough for regular family dinners, but far enough for our own space. We're expecting our first child next spring, and Kevin has already started planning the nursery renovations. Sometimes I still can't believe that one random act of helping a stranger led to finding the love of my life and the family I'd always dreamed of having.